Hello, everyone, and welcome to the episode number 3 of the Friends in 3D podcast. And my name is Katya, and I'm very happy to welcome today's guest. Her name is Cindy Nance. She's a wonderful photographer, also my friend on Instagram, on our stereo Instagram community. She's also a stereo photographer and a wonderful person. And I'm really thrilled to be able to have this conversation with her today. Hello, Cindy.
Hi, Katya. I'm really excited to talk about these things that have amazingly brought us together and together with so many other people in this amazing community. It's a great thing that through these last, year and a half to have a group of people that I've been able to bond with and to share something new that I've learned with. So thank you.
Yes, and as you said, I'm really interested in your journey as a photographer and as a stereo photographer. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and about your interests and about your background, as much as you would like to share with us.
Sure. Basically, I'm an explorer, both of the external world and greater universe, as well as my interior life. And in and of myself, I'm really nobody special. I'm an observer. I try to share the honesty of my experience, my perspective with others. I've been allowed to dream through my photography, and I've been privileged and encouraged by many other people to be a lifelong learner, which is, I think, what brought me to stereoscopy in the first place, was just something new that I could learn and challenge myself with.
So I know that from your Instagram that you were a photographer for probably many years. So I was wondering what brought you into photography. Was it your profession, or was it your passion? Was it the way of how you show your creativity, or how you channel your creativity?
Well, over the course of I guess about the past 8 to 12 years, photography has sort of become my side hustle. It's something that I've learned gives me a great deal of pleasure, and it gives me an opportunity to share my perspective with others. Photography initially was one of my dad's big hobbies. I often think about him with his cameras in his hand. He took regular photographs that filled photo albums, home movies, slideshows. Photography's always been a shared experience because of that, just because of me sharing that interest with him. I took memory pictures in my head long before I ever picked up a camera. He was in the Air Force, so we traveled a lot. There were 5 children in the family, so it was always road trip vacations, and we would explore different parts of the U.S. and had the opportunity to live in some amazingly beautiful places. So I think I began taking photos myself on long car trips when I became an adult, and I would go on road trips with my sister across the country to, visit relatives that lived in different parts of the United States, Iowa and South Dakota, and I'm in Texas now. I didn't have a real camera, and cell phones really weren't, they weren't smartphones yet when I started doing this in the 90s, but I'd fill up a suitcase with those little disposable Kodak cameras, film cameras, and then I would take pictures of everything and anything that caught my interest, and then I'd come home and have those all developed, and half of them I'd throw away, but half of them I would go, oh, this is fun, this is interesting. And I think ultimately that's what caused me to invest in, my own little point and shoot digital camera a few years later. So that's how I got started.
It's interesting that now that you mention it, and I didn't think about myself, this way, but I actually also got this passion for photography from my father, because he is a scholar, and one of his interests is actually the epic poetry of Mongolia. So he would go to Mongolia. I'm from Russia, from Soviet Union, originally. He would go to Mongolia and he would interview people who were actually the carriers of this oral tradition. And so he would have his Zenith camera. That's one of the quite famous, maybe you've heard about it. And I remember actually developing films in the dark room, which was just the kids' room. And we would black out the windows and do it. And again, I was too young to do it by myself, but I would watch my dad and my sister. And so they would develop it together.
That's cool. I don't have any experience myself with developing my own pictures. I sort of came a little late to film to really be able to learn that so much. So my experience has mainly been digital, although I think at some point, maybe in the future, I put my fingers into too many different pots, trying to learn too many different things. So I've not learned the film side of photography so much at this point, but maybe down the road that's something I do want to explore, just because film photography, I think, it's a different beast than digital photography. You have to really be thoughtful and plan your shots. You can't just take 100 pictures and throw out 90 of them. Film is a much more precious and limiting
Yeah, it's kind
medium.
of you have more responsibility because you wouldn't waste the whole
Yeah,
film
you don't want
yeah.
to waste a whole roll of film, or take a whole roll of film of the very same picture. You want to be thoughtful about what you're doing and sort of have an idea of what your idea is that you're trying to capture. So my digital photography, I think, is moving in that direction. When I first started taking pictures, it was like on burst mode, and I would just take, it'd be like, surely if I take enough pictures, something will come out. And as I've gotten more experience with that and learned more about the camera and learned more about photography in general, I find I'm taking a lot less pictures, but the ones I'm taking, I'm happier with.
Yes, I think I would say this. It works the same for me with stereos. I think I used to take much more stereos, but now I think I'm also kind of learning which objects wouldn't just look good in stereo. So makes no sense for me to take this. So just talking about stereos, can I ask you what brought you into stereoscopy?
Well, even though I've said a lot of times that I'm really new to stereo photography, I've had it pointed out to me in ways that I go, oh, that I'm not. On all of these long road trips with all of my siblings and my family, my mom would prepare a box or a bag full of things to keep kids occupied and out of their hair, and from fussing with each other. And among the objects in the bag were always Viewmasters and Viewmaster reels. Who knew? And I loved them. I loved sitting. I could, for as long as we had reels that I hadn't looked at 100 times, I just, happily sit in the back seat and immerse myself in that and shut out the nonsense that was going on in the car. I've seen a lot of 3D movies. I remember having the occasion to get, a pair of those paper anaglyph glasses and look at anaglyph photos, either, in comics or just photographs in general. So even though I didn't have the word stereoscopy or stereo photography in my vocabulary, I was exposed to it as a child and throughout my life. I didn't know the word. I didn't know any of the history. And I didn't really understand how it worked. So learning that has been a really eye-opening experience. And it's made it a lot more interesting to me. And it made it be something that when I first learned about it, I went, oh, this is something that could interest me in taking pictures again. I put down my cameras for a couple of years, and I was looking for something to make me pick my cameras back up again. So I had this Instagram account that I had created several years before. I started using it again, and I started following different photographers that I'd find and see their work on Instagram, and just trying to find a key that would take me back into photography. Stereography or stereo photography specifically, I remember, and I don't remember exactly how I saw it, but I saw in my feed some images from Curio Curators photo challenges a few years ago. and how, she sort of welcomed both 3D and stereo images as well as 2D images. And I thought, well, what the heck? I'm going to share a few of mine with the hashtag. And through that, it sort of opened up the community and the world to me. And I finally was able to feel I could ask for help to learn how to do it and how it's done and how to take the pictures myself. And you and several other people have been more than generous and instrumental in helping me learn that and learn those skills. I'm still far from able to consistently be able to take good stereo pictures, but I feel like I've progressed. You remember my first stereo name in the community, Stereo Fail. It was a challenge, but more than a challenge, it was really frustrating because I usually pick things up easily. And this I did not pick up easily. I really had to decide I wanted to learn it because it would have been really easy for me to just go, oh, it's too hard. But I've stuck with it, and through your encouragement and that of some others, it really makes me happy to be able to do it now. It's a wonderful hobby. I haven't figured out exactly what I want to do with it or pursue with it or what my niche is within the community. But it's sort of fun to explore that and to see everything that everybody else is doing.
For me, it was easier because I never was a photographer, never considered even myself as a photographer. So when I started it, I knew that I will be bad. And I didn't even know anyone. First, I started taking pictures, and then I started meeting people. But I can imagine that when you already have quite a long experience with photography, and just start basically from the scratch, I think it really requires some bravery and just to be brave, to be really curious and open-minded. I think I really love this, that you did it and that you went through this process. Since you are a photographer, I was wondering how similar or how different the mono shots versus 3D shots are for you in terms of your creativity. Yes, how do you see it, or how do you feel about it, both as a photographer but also as a viewer? Yes, because I assume you probably follow both, mono photographers and stereo photographers. How do you feel about it?
Well, it is very different for me. Looking at the pictures, it really does amaze me that how immersive stereo photography is, how the depth in a photograph or in an image in a stereo pair really can take you away from whatever else you're in the midst of and put you right there, which I think is a really incredibly wonderful thing. It is part of my 2D photography, and what I hope to do is to bring the people that see my images into the picture with me. I always consider, even though I'm not necessarily visible in the image, I'm always part of my images because I'm standing on the other side of the lens. And I hope that other people feel that they're immersed in what I'm seeing. They're standing right there with me, or they're seeing through my eyes. And with 3D photography, with stereo photography, that's even something that's heightened. But when I'm learning something new, I sort of have to learn the by rote process first, and I have to leave the creativity aside. So I've spent a lot of time focused on the nuts and bolts and the technical aspects of what makes a stereo pair work. And it's only been, I guess, really in the past few months that let me back up a little bit. One of the ways many of us learned was by taking sequential stereos with our cell phones. And as a photographer who's used to using a camera, the entire experience is part of my creativity. For me, the phone was always something to take family snapshots or to take location when I was out location scouting for, some place that I was wanting to photograph later, finding interesting compositions or interesting points of view. Learning to take photographs with my camera, I think, was a huge part of my mental block. because I'm not a snob about it, but I don't consider my phone a camera. I mean, it's in the greater scheme of Swiss Army knife of phones. That's one of the things that phones do, is take pictures. But for me, a lot of my creativity in my 2D photography is capturing movement, which with sequential photos you can't do because
Yes, absolutely.
it's got to be still. And I think that was a big part of my frustration. So once I decided, okay, I'm going to make the leap and I'm going to build myself a twin rig, I was able to take more of the pictures that I wanted to take. And so since the beginning of this year, when I sort of got that and figuring out how to use that tool, I feel I'm able to bring more of my creativity back into my pictures. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I understand. So these two parts of your creativity, they are finally coming back together. Yes, because of this tool. Yes, because it's similar to what you've been using before. And I just wanted to explain to our listeners that many of us are taking so-called sequential stereos, which means that you take one picture, you step sideways, and you take another one. So for this kind of stereo pictures, your object needs to be still. But what Cindy is doing, she is using two cameras connected, and these two cameras, they take two shots simultaneously. Yeah, so this way you can actually capture the movement, and there are also stereo cameras that can do it.
Actually, now that I'm less frustrated because I have the twin camera rig, I find myself taking more sequential stereos. Again, it's with my phone, so they're sort of the snapshot, slice of life variety. I don't know that they're in a real expression of my art. I think that the pictures that I take don't necessarily lend themselves to the camera, although I've seen some incredible photographs. So I take that back. Another thing is my perspective with the camera is usually landscape or horizontal, wider than it is tall, which doesn't necessarily work so much with stereo photography, because part of being able to view a picture, whether it's free viewing or with a stereoscope, is your eyes can only comfortably diverge to a certain extent before it becomes painful or impossible to fuse the images. And so wide horizontal landscape pictures aren't as well suited as portrait aspect, where you're looking up and down, because looking up and down, your eyes aren't having to go out. And these things are all things that I've learned during this technical exploration. So I'm still learning a lot. I'm still trying to figure out a lot and make what I want to take be accessible and viewable stereo, in a stereo format.
So for many of us, the stereoscopy is very connected to music and photography. And for me, it always, again, was the case even before I became a Queen fan or Brian May fan. I always heard this soundtrack when I was taking pictures or when I was looking at pictures. And I actually remember that I had this period, I think it was maybe 10 years ago, when my kids were very young, and I was just again looking for some distractions, just needed to do something. And so I was a fan of a very different band, of a Russian band, and I was putting together the pictures, mostly my pictures, my own pictures, and using the music, the songs of this band, so that they would match it like as a soundtrack. So I was wondering how it is for you. Do you feel this connection, or are these different channels, different phenomena?
I think I understand what you mean, and for me, I think it was a little bit different. I'm one of those people that for instance, I'm driving along in the car and I'll have the music going loud, and if I'm on the open road and I'm not having to worry about other traffic or other distractions, I just turn the music up to what I call ear bleed level, and I'm singing at the top of my lungs. But if I'm in traffic, or if I'm driving someplace that I'm not familiar with, I have to turn the music off so that I can focus. And I'm sort of the same way with photography. I've thought, I take my music with me. I take my earbuds and I've got my phone and I think, okay, well, I'm going to get out there and, I'll be sitting, and because a lot of the photography I do is setting up and waiting for the light or the conditions to be what I want to photograph. So there's a lot of waiting. So in those times I can listen to music. When I'm actively in the midst of using my camera and setting up and composing the shot. So when I'm focused on that, I can't talk to anybody. I can't be listening to music. I have to really be focused on it. So the music itself doesn't inspire me in the moment, but I think it inspires me before I take the photograph. I think it inspires me viscerally because music is something that I experience not just through my ears, but through my entire body. And then afterwards, when I'm developing or doing the post-production on photographs, then music is something that I find really inspirational, and it helps me focus after the fact. But the act of taking a photograph is sort of divorced from sound or music, other than just whatever the ambient sound is around me. As far as Queen and Brian May and their music was the tapestry of my generation. My personal focus, as I mentioned earlier, during the 70s and the 80s was theater. I was immersed in theater and performance. So there was always music playing, but I didn't collect records myself. I listened to what my friends collected and what were playing on their stereos. My sister is a musician, and so I remember through high school, she introduced me to a lot of different musical styles and artists through her record collection. And I can't really tell you the moment that I became a Queen fan, but I remember having Live Aid on the TV set the day that it happened. And it played all day. It was just one of those things that was sort of in the background all day. And I would walk through the room and something would capture my attention and I'd sit down and watch. Well, when it was time for Queen, seeing Freddie Mercury and the way he commanded the audience and the stage and the band and the entire mass of humanity and their response to the music really mesmerized me. And so I recall that was one of the sets that I actually sort of sat through with my mouth open and just agape going, this is really amazing. It wasn't too much after that, I think, when I saw the movie Highlander, and there's so much Queen music in Highlander. I mean, they're responsible for a large part of the soundtrack, and the music was thrilling. And I think that was what really, the combination of the pictures and the story and the music really did cement Queen as a band that I really admired. Dare I say that aside from Freddie Mercury, I knew there were other members of the band, but I really didn't know who they were. And it wasn't until I remember hearing, because my husband works in film and television, that they were making a Freddie Mercury biopic. And I was like, oh, I'm excited for that. And when he got his screener for the SAG Awards, they send out different movies for you to watch for your consideration so he could vote for the Screen Actors Guild Awards. One of the ones that came was Bohemian Rhapsody, and I watched it over and over, and then just sort of became an even bigger fan. Saw a lot of the interviews with Brian and Roger, as well as the actors, and I learned a lot more about them, of course, at that point. I didn't know about the stereoscopy connection, though, and that wasn't until I stumbled into the community, as we discussed earlier, that I really found out, oh, he's sort of a big deal, as far as bringing this form of photography back into some popularity and interest.
It's so great to see how different all those journeys are, because I came to stereoscopy through Queen. I can agree with you that up until 4 years ago, I also saw Queen as Freddie Mercury and the rest of the guys. I of course I knew how they looked like, but I mostly saw it as his band.
He was the front man,
Yeah.
and he was the voice, and he
Mhm.
was, I think to a large extent, the focus of the group, even though they're such a talented unit together and individually. I think being the front man, he just drew the attention.
So do you have any particular favorite songs or favorite albums that maybe we could chat about?
There a lot, the hits, of course, which is what I had experienced hearing. I've never been to one of their concerts. I can probably count the number of rock concerts I have been to on one, maybe a little more than one hand. Just because that's not where my interest was. I saw concerts in concert halls, a lot of musical theater. I'm a huge opera fan. The spectacle and the music, which is actually so much what Queen is the music and the spectacle, which I think is another thing that ultimately sort of drew me to them. You and I have talked a lot in the past about other artists and other bands that we just sort of love and are in our heads from our youth. And so with Queen, it was just the music that was on the radio of theirs, because it was so distinctive and you could always tell, oh, this is Queen. It was like when went to saw the Highlander, didn't really realize that Queen had written so much of the music, and the first strains of it, it was like, oh my gosh, I love this. So I really didn't take a deep dive into their discography until the last few years, and there are some tracks that I really love, things that are fast and driving. Stone Cold Crazy, Dragon Attack, Machines, Back to Humans.
Oh yeah.
I just adore Made in Heaven, the album that they put together posthumously after Freddie had passed. Mother Love just takes my breath away. Same. It's just things that are so steeped in emotion and feeling and just immersion in what they were going through, or to imagine what they were going through at that time.
Yeah, I love Made in Heaven too, and I was actually kind of avoiding it for a long time, because I had this period when I was a Queen fan when I was 14, 15, and probably I was just too young, to understand it. So I was kind of avoiding it, and then when I listened to it for real again about 4 years ago, I was just blown away. It's amazing. It's amazing, absolutely. So probably, I don't know the last the last question, but I was just curious, and I'm asking everyone about this. What does it mean to you to be a music fan? If it's applicable to you, like if you can say that you're a music fan, and also what does it mean to you to be a part of our stereo community? What does it give you?
This is a really great question, and when I read it initially, it was really difficult to figure out what I wanted to say or disclose. I think I appreciate what it means to be a fan of a band or of an individual artist, is the appreciation of their artistry and of their talent, from the composition, musically, to huge admiration for people that can string together words in a meaningful, evocative way, to actual performance, and as I said, the spectacle of the performance, and being able to be immersed in that, whether you're watching it on a screen or in those times when you're able to actually be immersed in the crowd and experience it, which is also an incredible thing. My daughter laughs at me. We went to the Austin City Limits Festival a few years ago, one day, she and I, and she, like my husband, doesn't usually do crowds. I don't mind crowds at all. And I remember wading into the midst of the crowd, probably 10 people back from the stage, just because I wanted to be enveloped in the sound and the crush of the crowd and everything that was part of the performance. It'd be really great, I think, to have that experience at a Queen concert, though I haven't had that, and I can only guess what that would be like. And from hearing other people in the community talk about how it is. Having had some family members who have had some limited success musically, as well as other performance art type things, I think colors my perspective as to on celebrity and stardom and how I feel about being a fan. I'm probably much more reserved than a lot of people are. Part of that's because I'm like really bashful. And part of that is just because I know that they're just people. And have good days, they have bad days, they may be incredibly, remarkably talented, but it all comes down to they're just people. And so I tend not to fangirl or gush a whole lot just because it's really not who I am. It doesn't mean I don't appreciate them. It doesn't mean that I don't appreciate their talent, but I think that the things that I admire and that I've been able to take most from Dr. May is not the music, or not only the music and not the stereography, interestingly enough, but it's his interest in astronomy, because the night sky is my bliss, and learning astrophotography for the past 6 or 7 years, you know, in slow incremental fits and starts has been my bliss. Until last year, I would never have thought, oh, I can go outside and take a picture of a comet, until he posted about going out and looking up and seeing neowise. Until he published Cosmic Clouds, it had never occurred to me that I might be able to take my own photography past the point where I am now and to learn more about astronomy and to do deep sky imaging. And that's something that I'm only now really starting to learn about and pursue. So I sort of have him to thank for that, in, you know, no small part. So it's a complex question.
Yes. Yes, but it's I think I can relate to many of things that you said, especially of this feeling of standing by the stage. I didn't have this experience with Queen and Adam Lambert. I was actually far in the back, but that's something that I really miss right now, you know, this year, not being able to be just enveloped in this sense of live music, of
the shared experience of being at a concert can be just transforming and amazing. So
again, communal experience.
So kudos for those people that are able to bring that kind of experience to people. Because not everybody, that's something that's pretty special that not everybody can do.
Yes. I think it's something that I really value in the concerts of Queen and Adam Lambert, obviously, but also in other concerts that I attended, like, for example, Bobby McFerrin, where you have this amazing connection, like the artists have these amazing connections with the audience, and the audience feels very involved in this process. Yes, and I think like you feel very equal, like you don't feel awkward, like it's something very natural, and I think it's really means a lot to me as a viewer, as a listener.
I agree. Being able to forget me and put myself out of my head and being able to be transported someplace else musically or through performance, I think is a really special thing.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll get back to this. That's something that really
we're slowly getting there. Like I posted earlier on my 2D account, my husband and my daughter, who, when they're not performing, also work technical theater, are working for the first time in 17 months. Not technically, not really the first time in 17 months, but it's the first time a touring show has come through since the COVID lockdowns in March of last year, 2020. So watching them get up and sort of get their coffee and do their morning prep and psyching up to go in and do that work after not having been able to do that work for so long was sort of fun this morning. And I couldn't resist taking the camera, my phone out and just snapping a picture of them sort of sitting there half groggy, but still talking about, just sort of the nervousness of doing something for the first time in such a long time, having not been able to.
Well, it's a great joy to hear this, like for your family, but also for all of us, that it's coming back, hopefully. Yes, I really hope so.
Yeah, slowly but surely, and it will be different than it used to be, I'm sure, in certain ways, and we'll all, well, not everyone, but I'll be wearing masks and so, being a little distant from people and not right up, smashed into a horde of people like we used to not think anything about it. And so I think our sensibilities have changed somewhat, and that'll color the way things evolve, but it's lovely to be able to get back to a little bit of normalcy. And music and the arts are something that are so intrinsic in my experience and bring so much, I think, to the world as a mirror to hold up, experience to other people. I'm very glad to see that happening again.
Absolutely, me too. So thank you so much for participating in this episode, for being my guest. It's been so fascinating, so interesting to hear your story and your journey in 3D, in photography, in music. I hope you have a great day. And again, thank you so much. And please, to our listeners, please tune in for our next episode next time.
Thank you, Katya. I've really enjoyed it. You have a great day too.
Thank you.